Why did the grassland cross the road? Because John Delpratt was doing a scrape on the other side. Okay, so John is an Honorary Fellow with the University of Melbourne. He lectured in plant production, seed technology and weed management at Burnley campus for more than 3 decades. In retirement, he advises on native grassland restoration research at the university and is project officer with the Woorndoo Chatsworth Landcare Group. More to the point, John is one of the most knowledgeable people in Australia about seed-based restoration, okay? He's gold and a mentor. The Landcare Group restores diverse native grassland by direct sowing on rural roadside reserves within the Moyne Shire in southwest Victoria. So please welcome to the stage John Delpratt.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone, what a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to be speaking about the resources we have available to us at Woorndoo Chatsworth, the community resources we have available, but also I'd like to spend some time on what we've learnt about restoration during the time we've been doing grassland restoration as well. So a bit to get through. I would like to acknowledge that we work on the lands of the Eastern Maar community. I recognise their trauma and I recognise their resilience, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders past and present. So Woorndoo is, the Woorndoo Chatsworth district is an agricultural area. If you're familiar with southwestern Victoria, the Hamilton Highway to the south, the Glenelg Highway to the north, Mortlake on the Hamilton Highway, we've got Lake Bollock on the Glenelg Highway, the Ararat Road runs straight up north from Mortlake, and Woorndoo is smack bang in the middle of those two. It's either very isolated or the centre of the universe, depending on your perspective. I think, yes, you can see them there. It's a very interesting area because we're actually in both cases, both for Chatsworth and for Woorndoo, we're actually on the edge of the VVP. On one side, the Salt Creek at Woorndoo, on the other side, the Hopkins River. And so we're on both VVP, basalt, and we're also on Dundas, very, very old Dundas sedimentary system. So most of what we think of as very, very fine grassland is actually off the VVP, and that applies to Woorndoo in particular. The village itself doesn't actually have any direct commercial activity there these days, which I'll come back to. However, it has a wonderful recreation centre. It has directly over the road the Woorndoo Common, which is an iconic area for these grasslands. Directly across the Salt Creek to the east is the VVP, and the Salt Creek itself is a very important corridor for eels and other life forms. To the west of that we have Chatsworth, where we do a lot of our work in David Franklin's nursery, and David also does grass production there as well. What we have out there are these wonderful two-chain roads, very, very wide road reserves. Usually the road runs down one side of them, and then you have this very broad space that's available for and has been retained, where we've got remnants retained. They've been, as Josh was telling us, they've been maintained over probably since the war, primarily as fire-safe areas, and that has coincided with the needs of at least a decent range of the remnant species which are on those roadsides. A lot of threatening processes now, but at the moment on this screen we're looking at a very fine example in early spring of one of those wide roadsides. And I think it's a beautiful shot because it has the clear evidence of agriculture on both sides, the canola crop on one side, the sugar gum plantation on the other, which would have been protecting grazing property back in the day and probably still is. But it's a very rich and diverse grassland there. So there are our reference communities for the work that we do. Just to give you some idea of the seasonal change in these places, this is the truly wonderful Woorndoo Cemetery. A lot of people know and visit the Woorndoo Common, but the cemetery is also an extraordinary place, and it's just up the north of Woorndoo a couple of k. So these are shots taken across the season. We have a shot there of the cemetery in October, early October. Most of the yellow there would be Craspedia, billy buttons, but very quickly it transitions. A month later, we've transitioned into a very abundant display of Bacardia umbellata, milkmaids, and just see the seasonal shift. One of the great advantages of this area is not only the quality of its remnants in terms of diversity and rarity, but it's also abundance. You get to see these species in great abundance in one place, and you can get a sense of just what these landscapes may have looked like. Now, we don't know whether these particularly fine displays are artefacts of our period in occupation, but it is wonderful just how dense these are. And when you think about Bacardia milkmaids, which is just so hard to restore, to see it there in such great density just suggests a very, very long occupation of that site. And then by early December, you've got the grasses beginning to express, the themata's getting up, kangaroo grass is getting up, and you've got the emergent forbs such as featherheads, Tylotus macrocephalus. So that's all much the same view across a couple of months. Whereas that is in fact an example of some of the restoration that the group has done. This was the very earliest of their grassland direct sown sites, and you can see there that it's abutting a wheat crop. So it went back onto what had been previously cropped land. In fact, that site was one of Stuvie's sites back in the early 1980s. So within that sort of time frame, it's gone through a cropping cycle and now a restoration. The crop beyond is in fact the site of our next restoration, which happened in 2019. But you can see there that that restoration has a feel of a grassland. It has good structure, lots of daisies, as Steve was telling us about, and although it's not evident there, that site is now transitioning very rapidly into a quite structurally important themata grassland. So what are our resources? Exceptional natural resources, well, we have that in diversity and abundance. We have the extensive local landcare experience, but only with a few individuals. So David Franklin, for instance, worked with Paul Gibson-Roy throughout his postdoc and helped him develop technique and machinery, and continues now to work in that area. We have some established grassland restoration experience through myself and David, and of course Paul's always on hand to give us some advice. Functioning nursery and native seed production area, which is where David's based, and a very supportive local and state authorities, so the Glen Alcop and CMA, the Moyne Shire and DECA have all been very supportive over the years. Small but reliable local volunteer force, and a supportive CFA, and again a shout out to Josh for helping us get burns done in more recent years. And we have, within our membership, we have CFA members as well. Institutional support from my university, from Fed Uni in Ballarat, and from Southwest TAFE. So all of them bring students to our sites. We've had project students. It's all, and I'm in so much trouble here because I've just been given the 5 minutes. Okay, so just some images there of just visitation to the site, and more recently constructing our grass spa, which is now, and that's a group of students from Southwest TAFE. Problems out there: depopulation, focus on public land conservation and restoration. So as a landcare group, we're not the traditional mob who work on farms. We're actually working on public land, so we don't have a natural home amongst the local agricultural people. Somewhat unsupportive locals, no direct financial benefit for the local community, so we can't argue that we're assisting the finances of the community directly, although we have Mortlake and Bowlake north of us, south and north of us. And it's challenging times for CFA brigades, as most of you would understand. So getting the fires done can be difficult. So our lessons from Landcare, we've been involved with this since about 2012 directly, although the Landcare Group itself is much older than that, 30 odd years. And we have some prior experience with the Grassy Ground Cover Research Project, which was Paul's postdoc. What we do know, we know about a fair bit about our species. We know which ones come through well in a direct sow in our environment. We have some information about seed and seed mixes, but of course, as we've heard today several times, seed is a vital and limiting resource for us. We produce our own seed for our projects. Site selection and preparation. We know about low soil nutrients, particularly phosphorus and nitrogen, and reduced or suppressed soil seed bud bank, and we take that very blunt instrument, the grader, and we do remove topsoil, and there have been questions about that already. I can't address them here in this forum, but if you have questions, by all means send them through and I'll address them if I can. All that we know is that when we do what we do, that we can achieve a functional and successful diverse grassland restoration. We've developed machinery and we have a fair bit to learn about it, but the follow-up management is an important question for us because we now have the sites to work on. Seed production at David's nursery, that's all above ground stuff. You saw an image of our new grass seed production area which will be in ground. That's a scalped site being sown by David's machine and an example of the sort of mix we sow. Among the challenges, missing and uncooperative species, so we don't get everything back. Even if we sow it, we don't always see it. And of course there are a lot of species which we aren't yet introducing through sowing, although we do have planting days as well. So a couple of examples, chocolate lily, which seems to germinate so readily in the nursery, is difficult to get back on our sites, and Bacardia is a particular challenge. Seed production and processing and contamination. So if we field harvest any of our seed, then there's always the risk of contamination. Site selection and preparation. Understand that what we do is a relatively narrow exercise. If you're going to use topsoil removal, then you're going to be working in very specific sites. We're not recommending this as a cure-all. If there's surface rock, as there is just to the east of us, if there are steep slopes, obviously we can't use that particular technique, but we are investigating alternatives to topsoil removal, and I'm working with the group at Burnley as well, and you heard Nick speak about capping rather than scalping to suppress, to lower the nutrients in that original sowing layer and to suppress seedlings. And here's Soph doing some work on one of our research sites out at Woorndoo, and there we've got a fully replicated experiment looking at a couple of different levels of scoria as a suppressing blanket, and then whether we just direct sow or whether we direct sow and plant to see which is the best. And this now is particularly to look at smaller scale restoration, so restoration around the edges of good grassland, expanding good grassland areas and patching areas where the grasslands have been damaged internally and we need to suppress weeds. So we're just doing that work now to see how those smaller scale techniques can benefit us out there. Follow-up management continues to be an issue. We have lots of discussions about whether it's best to spot spray and try and get things out of the system, or whether we've just got to learn to live with them and work out what can and can't be used, can be sustained. And wind-dispersed invasives such as annual grasses and weed orchid, which is occupying a lot of our time. So just a quick summary. There's a genuine community engagement in native, as demonstrated today so clearly, a genuine interest in not only conservation but also restoration. Diverse native grassland communities can establish from scratch by direct sowing, and I think we have established that. The barriers include seed supply, the amount of money to be spent, because there's a big capital investment up front, less later we hope, human and technical resources, you need people involved, coherent policy to stimulate this sort of activity, and of course difficult sites, which we work on relatively straightforward sites. The point I want to finish with is that in the meantime, we have so many sites we've heard about today which are really difficult to work on. But if you can choose a site which has no particular native value, possibly a history of agriculture, then you have the opportunity to restore at scale, and we have hundreds of kilometres of roadside which could benefit from this, and we've heard about the benefits of the lower biomass, the reduction in phalaris, etc. So could be restored by applying our existing knowledge. And I thank you for your time. That is one more slide. That earlier slide I showed of the restoration from 2013, that's the state of play now. And as you can see, it has nice themata structure, it has nice wildflowers, still lots of daisies in there. And as I said, thank you very much.
So considered. Such detailed knowledge. It's more like, not like war, it's more like a chess game. We've got some momentum here, and it's just great to see so much grassy action and grassy love in one place. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Fantastic, and that's it.